Hi everyone, I'm Dean Waye from talkaboutcable.com, and this is our webinar where we talk about the next job growth areas for cable employees. Here's how the webinar will go. First up, we have Bob Hallahan, a cable strategist, to talk about what the next 5 years are going to look like at cable companies. Then we'll hear from David Rolfe, Andrew D'Souza, and finally Fuad Raja. They're each going to provide details and some surprising insights into things that cable companies are investing in right now. Before we talk to Bob, just one quick note. If you find that something here sparks a question for you, the way to get the answer is to send an email to webinar@talkaboutcable.com. When you do that, you'll get an automated reply with information on how to connect with the folks presenting here today. Okay, let's jump in and start with Bob Hallahan. Like everyone in this webinar, Bob's been working with cable companies for over a decade. Today, he's the cable strategist for Nokia Software. So, Bob, we want to start off and we want to talk about the bigger picture for cable over the next 2 to 5 years. What's the state of the industry today around areas that are growing and areas that are not? What's going to have to be done in the next few years by the cable industry, or what's going to be done in the next few years by the cable industry to get to the 5 year sort of future state that they're looking at? And then what's it going to look like 5 years from now? So how's cable look today?
Yeah, sure, Dean. So I think as we're all aware in the cable business that the cable residential business has slowed down significantly, mostly around the video and voice services. But with that said, at the same time, there's been a pretty healthy level of growth for the cable companies, primarily in the broadband business. That is really being driven by the onslaught of massive level of streaming services, high quality streaming content that is driving really that cable cutting and the traditional cable video services. At the same time, that threat is enabling the MSOs to kind of maintain numbers which Wall Street uses to measure their profitability.
So their numbers are still good, and Wall Street's still happy because even though people are cutting some services, they're spending money somewhere else, or
that's correct. Yeah, broadband has a healthier profit margin than the traditional video, service that have been offered over the years. The thing that's happening as well, that the cable operators have seen this coming for years and have been very, very busy at determining and defining the optimal strategy. It's not so much just, hey, let's just go after broadband internet services, but rather let's bundle with other value added capabilities for their residential as well as commercial customers, to allow those customers to have better insight, better control, better visibility, and better offerings, and allowing them to really compete much more effectively against the new competitors that have taken really their traditional video business away. So they've come back at the video market with competing video streaming services, but at the same time, they're also being smart about changing their model, and they're kind of looking at more collaboration, they're kind of the frenemy type model, collaborating more effectively with their over-the-top players such as the Netflix and Amazons of the world, by deploying much more the proven advanced, very sophisticated set-top box platforms out there, such as the X1s and Convoys of the world, which offer effective way to engage their customers, not just with video, but really kind of combining the ability to offer the video service, but with advanced features such as voice control and navigation, interactivity, and all of that is enabling them to kind of bring all of the best of broadband type applications, such as internet security, such as ability to control their the Wi-Fi experience and access to Wi-Fi networks, its ability to control connected devices in the home or in the business, offer a much more high value service to their market, and so that's really driving a lot of growth for them at this moment.
So you mentioned residential and then also businesses. So is residential the focus or commercial the focus for the next 3 to 5 years? For growth, I mean.
So for growth, most of the growth for cable companies at this point will actually be in the business commercial sector. And a lot of that is really being enabled through the deployment of technologies that previously were not available, cloud-based services such as software-defined networks, network function virtualization, et cetera. These types of services have matured and are more reliable and more cost effective now, easily accessible through sources, such as companies like Amazon, Google, and so on. So the cost effectiveness of these services and the reliability and the maturity of these network services are allowing cable companies to take advantage of this by offering commercial voice, complex kind of voice business services to the market, and being able to deploy and manage and deliver these services in a much more cost-effective and time-to-market fashion than their traditional telco competitors are able to. And this has been driving a significant amount of growth for most of the major cable operators today, and will continue to do so going forward.
Okay, so we've got really broadband and connected home on residential. We've got commercial services and MFB on the commercial side. So that's sort of the present state. What are cable companies going to be working on? What are they going to be investing in the next 2 to 5 years to get to the future state that they want to get to?
So this future state will require them to really transform the underpinning technologies and back office systems from a state where they are currently designed and architected to focus more around an individual house account, and not so much looking at individual subscribers or individuals who live in that house or even that business. So now the model, it needs to transform from the traditional kind of cable model of an address location to an individual customer, which is very similar to what the wireless operators have been operating in over the years. And this will allow then the cable companies to kind of compete head to head directly, as well as the streaming operators, to be able to offer much more personalized services, to do much more interactive and direct ad placements that will also, all of these things will generate significant amount of revenue. It will reduce churn, it will increase customer satisfaction and customer experience, and so on. So a lot of this, again, is underpinned on the cable companies' ability to really rapidly transform their IT infrastructure. So that's, for example, going from their legacy kind of product catalogs to something that's a little bit more dynamic, similar to what you would see on the streaming operator side, like an Amazon product offerings that are personalized, more customizable, and more easily configured and deployed to the market as the market demands change. So that's really kind of the thrust of where we're seeing a lot of this transformation. And then again, also from the experience standpoint, one of the key things that's happening with cable companies is they've recognized that they need to transform first the way the employees who service their customer base are able to understand the customers, what the customer's experience is, and be able to support those customers much more effectively, so that if the employee experiences can be improved, then that directly relates to the experience that the customers have around the support and the service that they're provided by the employees of those cable companies.
You think that cable companies are going to refocus on their own employee satisfaction?
Yes, exactly. So kind of the saying is the customer experience, or CX, is directly hinged on the success of their ability to improve EX, or employee experience. Happy employees, people that are working for cable companies that feel like they really do know what's going on, they can solve the problems that the customers are having, and deliver an experience to that customer that is much more gratifying to not just to the customer, of course, makes the customer happy, and it also makes the employees happy. So it's a win-win kind of dynamic, something it's a major kind of transformation that has occurred kind of around strategy and mindset of cable operators.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned transformation or digital transformation earlier. Could you explain digital transformation a little better and how that's going to impact various parts of the cable industry? Let's talk about that for a second, just so I can put it in context. Let's say I'm a florist, and so I'm a small business customer of a cable operator. What does the cable company's digital transformation look like to me at that end? What can I do, or what do I no longer have to do?
That's a great example. So, as a, kind of a small, mid-size business customer, they will be able to see a huge leap forward in their ability to order the custom specific precise service that they need, whether it's a configuration, the number of phones that they need within their office or offices across a local market, regional, or even nationwide, be able to understand the usage and the access controls and so on to their devices, whether it's for broadband or wireless Wi-Fi to their customer base as they go in and out of their stores or their footprints. Being able to give them clear, simple to use dashboards that give them not just the control around who can access what services and network capabilities, but also what customers are doing as they come in and out of that footprint, if you will. Once you can get a better understanding of that, that allows you then to deliver a better, service as a florist or whatever business that you're in.
So as a customer, it sounds like I won't have to wait on hold. I won't have to stick to a limited menu of offerings or products, that I can do a lot of the stuff in the future.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think if you ask almost everyone out there, they would, tell you that they cringe at the thought of having to call a customer service line and go through the whole process of who are you, your account number, et cetera, and then being transferred multiple times, and then finally, finding out that you can't get your question answered or your problem solved. Giving them technologies that allow them ideally through mobile applications and through, smart, applications that are leveraging chatbots, for example, and artificial intelligence and learning capabilities that understand your timeline, your entire customer experience from the day you became a customer, whether that was 20 years ago or yesterday, and understanding what your needs are and where you want to go next with the service allows then the customer to have a much better experience and ultimately results in higher satisfaction from the customer experience as well as loyalty, and all that translates again into recurring revenues that you can count on from in more of a long-term strategy.
So another one of the growth areas then is that the cable companies are going to learn a lot more about their customers and do a lot more for their customers automatically on the infrastructure side of the cable business. Okay. So they're going to be investing in digital transformation. What else that gets us between the present state and the future state?
So there's some other key areas. Cable operators are really diversifying their business significantly, much more collaboration with their kind of traditional competitors, even wireless operators who are increasingly, a threat to their market share and their customer base, competing from the standpoint of, offering, MVNO offerings that are tightly linked to the core services, high-speed data and broadband. And being able then to leverage the wireless footprint by allowing their cable service to be extended out through a wireless network, and being able to have a customer consume live television or content that has been pre-recorded or on demand even through a mobile device over a wireless network. So it's kind of all blurring together, if you will, the cable network footprint together with a 4 and 5G wireless MVNO offering, or even an operator who's going to go out, a cable operator who will go out and build their own network. Having the network and being able to control the end-to-end experience is a very critical part of the competitive advantage that cable operators see over companies who are just providing the content, the streaming content providers or the like.
So if I'm a cable customer 5 years from now, and the two-part question, if I'm a cable customer 5 years from now, and if I'm a cable employee 5 years from now, what's my experience like as a cable customer? Probably either residential or really even commercial seems to be an even more interesting way to go. And as a cable employee, what are the sort of hot shot parts of my company's business now that I might want to keep an eye on and maybe move into?
Okay, yeah. So the first part of that question around, what would the customer expect to experience or see in a few years down the road? Really, I think that they're going to start to experience the services from cable operator to be very similar to the services that they have been experiencing from wireless operators, more personalized, more interactive, more predictive from the standpoint, and a lot more self-control and visibility and insight into and control into the service and the experience that they receive. So then from the standpoint of the employee, person who works for a cable company today, supporting all the various IT systems that enable a cable company to offer and sell and provision and fulfill a voice service, whether it be residential or commercial or high-speed data or what have you. Many of those technologies will be transformed and replaced by nimble and flexible and more cost-effective solutions that are based on cloud type services and architectures. The emphasis will be less on custom configuration and development. It's more of a configurable plug and play type of approach to the services and the solutions that will be offered. So these types of employees probably start to need to look at their skill sets and where they can start to learn and develop the capability to support some of these newer technologies, cloud-based technologies, artificial intelligence technologies, big data, machine learning, for example. Another kind of key growth area for cable operators will be around their ability to leverage the solutions and services that they offer today, more, not so much bundled, but I would say more converged. You can then also blend in with that your Wi-Fi management, in addition to all of the management of various devices and Internet of Things and home security technologies and solutions. So from one place, from sitting on your couch, in the future, you'll be able to see your entire world, manage and control and monitor every aspect of your kind of connected life.
All right, Bob, thanks. I learned something every time I talk to Bob. Now, let's dig into one of the biggest potential growth areas for cable in the next few years, 5G backhaul and edge computing. And that means David Rolfe. David works for VoltDB, one of the companies that's focusing on creating the new high-speed computing world we're almost living in. What's the current state of 5G backhaul today?
It's just starting to happen. We're going to need the capacity 5G will unlock. The 4G spectrum is getting full. Increasing demand for stuff is utterly remorseless and keeps going. And we're heading towards a situation where we're going to run out of bandwidth and we're going to need 5G. The word I'm getting from people on the inside, prospects and customers, they're expecting in the telco industry volumes to go up by tenfold. And they're also expecting really aggressive latency requirements. The problem with edge computing is that the speed of light is about 186 miles per millisecond.
Right.
If I am offering or need 2 millisecond latency, that means that assuming I process at infinite speed, which I won't, I need to be no more than about 180 miles away from the server I'm speaking to. When you actually get down into the weeds and start doing this as a real service, it means a data center in every town, possibly every zip code, potentially every street corner, which all of a sudden means that the cable company has gone from being terribly unfashionable to being considerably more lucrative than WeWork, which has a similar real estate business model but just uses it differently.
Yeah, there's a lot of existing physical plant. And I guess when you say data centers, I mean, we're not talking about gigantic buildings anymore. You can do quite a lot with a relatively small building.
I don't need to be big. I just need to be close.
Right. So if I'm in charge of real estate or I'm in charge of facilities management for a cable company, all of a sudden these outlying buildings, these little tiny pockets of capacity that I've got sprinkled all over my footprint, those now turn into data centers.
We've got two things happening. We want really low latency and we want to add a 0 to volumes.
Okay, so I want to talk about sort of the gap and what's going to happen between current state and future state. But let me just summarize what I heard you say around the current state. Yeah. So if you're a cable company, you've got this sort of slow moving but inevitable 10x requirement for your backhaul operation. Yeah. Where there's going to be a lot more data and a requirement or an SLA for very, very, very low latency, probably no more than 0.02 of a second, which is, to go over and back, that means 1/1000th of a second each way. And on the flip side of that, besides, the sort of hard engineering problems that are going to have to be tackled, you just don't add 10 times capacity to get 10 times capacity. You don't add 10 times the machines or anything. It's a whole different way of thinking about how you're going to move data over wires. And it's a whole different way, sort of model of thinking for how you're going to approach that kind of engineering problem. And then on the sort of parallel to that, you have cable companies where they have a lot of real estate, a lot of footprint all over their various markets around the country. And for the most part, these small facilities are sitting, if not empty, largely empty, right? I mean, they used to be filled with equipment, and now you don't need maybe one or two boxes to manage the neighborhood or the area that they're servicing. So you've got a lot of physical space capacity that could be filled with generic hardware and moving computing and communication, and so the backhaul operation very close, especially to commercial customers, hospitals, large manufacturing facilities, office towers, any place where like a lot of computer processing, a lot of imaging or something, a lot of communication might be done.
That's kind of it, but there's more stuff, there's more to meet the eye here, because it's not just a question of the processing moving out to the edge, which is going to be bad enough. It's not just a question of volumes going up, but the way people spend money is going to change. When the telcos started pushing virtualization, the story we were all told is, oh, it's so we can elastically scale during the day, right? Now, nobody actually does that. That's not what actually happens. The truth of the matter is they lived in a world of CapEx where you budgeted for a system, you went to the vendor, you said you wanted to do X, Y, and Z. The vendor shrugged, asked its own technical people who shrugged, and they came up with some ridiculous hardware estimate that was massively more than you'd ever need. Boxes with vendor logos would show up in your data center and sit there consuming power for the next 5 years, and nobody wanted to talk about it once it was installed because it was CapEx and it was embarrassing. In one previous job, I was sent to a customer site, a well-known telco, to measure the performance of our system, and at busy hour, it was 3%.
So what's going to happen between today and when we get to the future state where we have super low latency and tons of 5G capacity all around us?
If I were a cable company, I'd start looking seriously at doing micro data centers, which I know is a complete oxymoron, but you'd want to be offering capacity at the edge. You'd want to be going to the same kind of business AWS is. Instead of having 7 data centers, you'd have 7,000.
Right.
And you'd own it, you'd operate it, you'd make money on the incoming and outgoing bandwidth. You might even give them the space. This is all going to get commoditized. You won't be in the business of being able to get away with offering a custom premium vendor-specific service. Everybody will be operating the same services. And so what do you compete on? You compete on economies of scale, and you compete on real estate and location, which is where all of a sudden the fantastically dull and boring cable companies come roaring back to life as they own the most obscure but useful real estate in America.
Right.
That's where it all comes back in a circle. It's all very well owning 50 square. I mean, I am 3 miles from Google's data center in Dublin. You know, it's great. They own a square kilometer of Dublin. Yippee doo dah. What they actually need to do is in future owning 20 square meters in 1,000 locations in Dublin might be a lot more useful.
That's a problem the cable companies have already solved because, you know, as far as regulatory and permits and ownership of the land or long-term leases or whatever, it's all been handled. It's all in the past, so it's all.
And if you look at 5G, one of the sensitivities about 5G, we're already seeing what looks suspiciously like disinformation campaigns by people who have no ability to market and sell 5G, you know, claiming 5G, you know, makes cows die, causes cancer, you know.
I haven't heard anything like that yet, ever.
But we're seeing it, at least in Europe. People are saying, oh, should we have 5G? I've heard bad things. And the reality is the 5G wavelengths won't even go through leaves, never mind people. There's a reason we haven't used it up to now. And to come back to an earlier point, the reason we're using 5G spectrum is it's because it's what's left after we use everything else. So don't think it's not going to be easier than any other generation. And anybody who looks at it realizes you need far more hardware, far more antennas, far more locally spaced. And all of a sudden, if I need an antenna every 100 meters or 100 yards or so, how many organizations in America or Canada, for example, are capable of doing that in a metropolitan area without either persuading the government to buy land or having an infinite amount of money?
Right. I mean, just look at, you know, one example from years ago was Google Fiber, right? Yeah. Trying to build out and light up. I mean, it wasn't that the technology was a problem for Google. It's that the construction and the permitting all of the various real estate and taxation and ownership kind of problems for wiring up a city, they were enormous. And you kind of, it's very helpful to already have that in your past and done with, or, have expertise on how to do more of it, which the cable companies have.
But also to be trusted by local government to do these things sensibly.
Yeah.
If I were in local government, who would I trust more, the cable company or a fancy internet startup? It's a completely different speed and mindset, and one which might be rather less frightening to the government figures who actually have a say in this.
So if I'm working in a cable company, this is a hypothetical, we haven't sort of talked about this yet.
Yeah.
If I'm working in a cable company, let's say I'm in like the video business, or I'm in residential voice, or I'm in one of many other departments where really not being tagged as the next growth areas or profit centers for the cable industry. And I'm looking at 5G backhaul, and I'm looking at edge computing. Like, what would I want to start learning about, either from a business perspective or technology perspective? So where would someone even start?
Look at things like Kubernetes, which is sort of one of these breathtakingly obtuse subjects when you first look at it, and you're better off starting to look at it now. So 6 months from now, you might have actually figured it out, because it's kind of complicated, but it's a way of abstracting computing from where it is. And so you could see yourself in a future where a cable company will be essentially a localized B2B data center serving enterprise, where they'll have micro data centers in huts all over America. All of this stuff is going to come to the fore. So things like business is going to be business initially, because businesses have to build these applications.
Right.
And you're going to be looking at things with quite small profit margins. It isn't going to be traditional Silicon Valley business plan. Let's throw $8 billion at it and then we'll see if it makes money. It's going to be people finding niches, people finding things that they can prove works, and that it will be low margin. It won't be, and it will be very profitable at scale, but individually, it will be a very low margin thing, and it will be dependent on optimizations in real time work.
Okay, that's not necessarily a problem for an infrastructure company like a
cable.
No,
because culturally they get that.
Yeah.
They are used to not, renting a Learjet every time they need to go somewhere.
And they're used to operating at scale.
Yeah, and so and they also need the processes and structure to cope with that. Because once you need a degree of discipline. If fixing any kind of physical hardware involves a truck roll, you need a degree of discipline and structure in your organization. Right. So culturally, a lot of the older cable companies would be much better attuned to that.
A lot of the same scale and uptime and thinking about things in sort of a low margin but high volume kind of environment, and the lessons you get culturally just from working in that kind of environment and becoming good at it. A lot of that sounds like it's directly transferable to 5G backhaul and edge computing. It's just different technologies.
And traditionally, we've been all afraid of being turned into a dumb pipe. It ceases to be a dumb pipe when you're talking about 1 millisecond latency. It has to become a fairly clever pipe at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
And a lot of the pipe work will not be going to obscure data centers in Seattle or the outskirts of Dublin or whatever. It'll be going to places close to you. And that has all sorts of routing implications and management implications, which only people with a lifetime of experience managing this stuff will be able to get their head around first time.
Oh, makes sense. Next up is Andrew D'Souza from the CTO team at OpenNet. Now, OpenNet's been in cable for a long time with all 4 of the largest cable operators. They developed some of the pioneering work in broadband and voice measurement and the first comprehensive audience measurement for linear TV. Today, Andrew's going to spend a few minutes talking to us about IoT. So, Andrew, around IoT, what's the state of cable today?
So I think in the current state of play today, the MSOs do play a growing role in the IoT space, but it is primarily focused on the residential segment at the moment.
What do you think the cable companies are going to be investing in and working on as they try to get from today's state, which is mostly residential, to future state, which I'm sure will include a lot of commercial as well?
Yeah, I think the promising opportunities for MSOs lie in the enterprise space. There's a clear recognition in the cable industry that IoT certainly has great potential in the enterprise space, and certainly the larger and more innovative MSOs see IoT as a major new line of business. Aligned with that, cable industry organizations have launched initiatives to enable the development of IoT networks for their MSO members, for example, using long-range radio or LoRa technology, which is a low-cost and efficient way to connect smaller IoT devices, such as sensors, that can be used both indoors and outdoors. So that's one example. And the driving objective here for this sort of initiative is to provide the MSOs with the tools to compete as IoT network providers in the enterprise segment. And so potential solutions that are enabled by some of these initiatives include things like remote maintenance and control of industrial facilities. So, for example, a factory or a warehouse, potentially even office space.
So along the smart cities kind of stuff that we hear about.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the big data is an area I think that's already being widely explored, and the goal here would be for cable MSOs to incorporate big data analytics type capabilities into their own IoT offerings to add a layer of value over and above providing just the technology to their customers who are using their IoT solutions.
On CBRS, from a non-technical aspect, this was another part of the spectrum that was dedicated. I think the Navy, in the United States, the Navy
Navy doesn't use all of it, and so the idea is the FCC decided that it could be put to better use. And so, like I said, it's going to be a sort of a prioritized access scheme. The top tier will be the incumbent, primarily the Navy, and all the existing priority users of the spectrum. The FCC will then auction on a geography and a time basis the second tier of that spectrum, if you will, and then any free spectrum that's available at any point in time will be available for general access. So that's the third tier of users.
Sure. And if I'm a company that has the resources to move into or play in the wireless space, and I'm regionally centric, the way a cable company is, there are no cable companies that operate in every city or even every state. Being more regionalized means they wouldn't have to bid on national spectrum.
Exactly, and so it's a much more flexible approach.
And so, I mean, the cable company's been eyeing CBRS, and they have CBRS projects underway. Are there any other reasons why, as a cable company, I'm interested in CBRS?
Yeah, so the MVNO certainly using the CBRS band to access spectrum that augments the spectrum that's already used by their subscribers' mobile devices as part of the MVNO deals. Uh-huh. Today, most of these devices go between the LTE network, the Wi-Fi hotspots that the cable operator has installed. Potentially down the road, it could switch between LTE and some CBRS small cell, as well as Wi-Fi. So you've got sort of an extended set of capabilities in that regard. Another opportunity around this sort of CBRS deployment is for cable operators to supply the backhaul from the small cells back to the core network.
Right.
So again, all with the view of limiting some of the exposure to the more expensive agreements that they have with the mobile operators as part of the MVNO offerings that the cable operators may have. Another opportunity is around using CBRS as a fixed wireless technology to expand the service footprint into areas not currently covered by their existing cable network. So if I have, let's say, a relationship with a business customer who may have some presence within my service footprint and some presence outside my service footprint, I could potentially use CBRS to beef up the in-building coverage, in-building wireless coverage for those customers as well.
So future state, cable companies 2 to 5 years down the road for IoT, CBRS is going to play a big role. So if I'm a cable company employee and I think that IoT is interesting, what kind of jobs are we looking at being invested in over the next few years as cable companies move from the today's state to the future state?
The wireless area certainly is one that's going to be a tremendous focus. We've already seen that to some extent with some of the Wi-Fi from several years ago, now moving into the MVNO space. So just a growing recognition that the world is becoming less wired, certainly from a human subscriber point of view. Wireless and mobility and being connected while on the go is becoming a has become already a big priority. And I think we're starting to see some of that, probably less so for certain use cases within IoT, but certainly that there are several use cases around mobility. So just generally, I think it's expensive to connect things using wired infrastructure. So wireless is a certain good area for career development, career growth, and learning for future possibilities. Big data, I think, is another area that could be of importance going forward if cable companies choose to invest in that area, which I think will almost certainly happen. They've certainly started doing that in their core business today around some of the video services that they offer and extended into the IoT services. I think another area would be around the business aspects of IoT, so different industry verticals such as municipalities, oil and gas companies, automotive. There's certainly retail, shopping malls, and those sorts of verticals. Each one of them has potential for cable companies to offer IoT solutions, but the business models, the business requirements are different across each of these depending on the services and the specific use cases. So potentially getting an understanding of the unique needs in each of these areas and being able to convert those into a coherent set of requirements for the operator to be able to design and develop products that meet the needs of the market, I think would be another area to focus on. There's certainly different challenges, and I'm not sure that at this point in time, at least, that the cable companies have fully grasped the nuances across all of these different areas. Cable companies are largely focused on the residential segment today. Some of the more innovative ones are expanding into the enterprise space, but I think as the core sort of video and ISP connectivity business comes under sort of cost pressure from cord cutting and competitive streaming services, I think the enterprise space in general and IoT in particular is a very promising area of growth for the cable companies looking into the future.
Thanks, Andrew. And finally, let's talk about cable wireless with Fuad Raja. Fuad is also a former cable company employee and a former consultant at Accenture. And today he's at FAR Consulting, where he's been helping cable companies develop their wireless strategies for over a decade now. So Fuad, here's my first question. What's the state of wireless in cable today?
That's a great question. The relevant industries really here is the wireless MNOs, mobile network operators, and then the cable companies with their two biggest products, which is video and broadband today. So if we take a look at the wireless revenues, annual revenue, it's registering at $290 billion a year. And their annual growth from 2014 to 2019 is teetering about 1.1%. It's a very saturated market. They're looking for ways to get things going again. On the flip side, if you look at the cable companies, their bread and butter for so many years, video, is registering revenues of about 89.1 billion. However, their annual growth from 2013 to 2018 is at a negative 2.1. However, if you look at their broadband product, it is healthy. It is registering revenues of $114 billion a year, and their annual growth from 2013 to 2018 is around 4.1%. So you clearly see that there's a healthy part of the cable industry through its broadband. The wireless companies are looking for a way to find new ways to sell to new customers. And that's why the MVNO makes sense. If you look at the MVNO industry in general, and their annual growth from 2013 to 2018 is 4.2%. So it makes sense for the cable companies who are looking for ways to grow their revenue. And it makes sense for the wireless companies who are looking for a way to expand beyond their saturated market to look into the MVNOs. It's a win-win for both industries. However, this MVNO model is not your MVNO models when you were 20 years old back in the 90s and 2000s. Back in the 90s and 2000s, when MVNO models were introduced, they were simply a copy of what the MNO offered. So why does the MVNO model for cable companies make sense today? Because the ground has shifted on how they can operate it. There are things such as Wi-Fi offloading. There are things such as being on small cell, bring your own device. All these things have combined together to allow flexibility from a business model perspective that gives the cable companies more flexibility and more ways to offer their customers better services for better pricing and also for more control into the network without owning the network itself.
So instead of just being a straight up reseller, cable companies can provide everything from Wi-Fi hotspots to enhanced messaging maybe and so on down the road because they're already network companies.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Where if you look at cable companies, they're starting to build elements of the network all the way almost to the core of the wireless network without stopping there. For example, they're introducing AAA, they're adding policy servers, and they're also leveraging their small cells, as I said. And all of this, along with bring your own device, along with being able to strike roaming agreements and bringing their devices from device manufacturers, is presenting them as a viable option in wireless. You will see that they've decided also to spend on advertising. Until recently, you really never saw the cable companies advertise. So they are serious about getting into this. I have to add that they're able to actually disrupt the market, producing services for mobile that are less expensive than your MNOs of Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T's of the world.
So they're in it to win it.
They're in it to win it, and they're
All
not
right.
in it just to simply save their cable customer. They're in it to actually provide the cable customer value.
Okay. So what are the cable companies going to be doing? What are they going to be investing in? What's their focus going to be? Where's the investment and the new jobs?
At the end of the day, the customer wants unified communications. The cable companies will continue to look at each other and see what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And collectively, they'll come up with a formula that says, okay, in order for us to launch successfully, we have to launch it within this formula. I think they're going to continue to rely on Wi-Fi or small cell or pure wireless cellular to continue to improve everywhere.
So they're becoming a hybrid of the traditional plain vanilla reseller MVNO and the MNO itself. I mean, I've had conversations with I think all four of the top companies over the last 2 years, and they're actively planning or even building out network aspects like traditional telecom network aspects, so that they can have more flexibility and less reliance on what the traditional four MNOs are willing to sell them.
Absolutely, and and this is what helps them in their quest is their footprint. There are certain aspects that help them, such as where is their networks? If the network is in a condensed area where there is quite a bit of reliance on small cell, then they most likely have a different play from someone who's probably in a rural area where there's less of a fixed broadband network.
So it sounds like some of the focus for jobs in that area for the next several years, it's a pretty wide spectrum. There's telecom network type jobs, broadband network type jobs, marketing jobs, strategy jobs, business planning, business analyst kind of jobs.
There's a lot of innovation that's going into it. And the product life cycle or product development life cycle is at its truest form. From thinking down the line, and you ask the question, where are we going to go in the future? So you have to think about the 5-year product roadmap, the technology. Yeah, you need folks for that. You need people who are strategists to realize where is the best strategy, what's the landscape, competitive landscape is. Also, you need technology innovators to be able to take a look at the different technology component and architect a solution that wraps around what you own, the assets that you own in the network, and what you can leverage from your partners. And then from the marketing aspect, this is new to cable, how they are spending, how they're assigning a certain spend into true marketing efforts that go over your traditional media, which will continue to grow with wireless. So yes, I think wireless will continue to encapsulate all aspects of the value chain, to include marketing, product development, product management, technology, and whatsoever. So I think that's what makes it more of an attractive area to work, and an area where we anticipate to see a lot of growth among the cable companies.
So looking out, let's say 3 to 5 years, what does the future look like for wireless at cable?
As an employee, expect to keep up with the technology, because there will always be a quest to provide superior service to the customer at a lower cost. And as the technology evolves, so will the jobs evolve with it. So you will be a emerging market, emerging technology expert within the wireless industry, and you'll have to keep up with it. The entire value chain, whether you're in marketing, back office, or accounting, or business management of it, you will continue to have an opportunity to grow into a role within the wireless aspect segment of the cable industry.
All right. Any final comments or points you want to make about wireless and cable?
I think the cable companies are poised to do well in that they know, they've known their customers for many, many years. They've been in contact, physical contact with their customers for many years through their field ops, and this will continue just to give them a little bit more of a leverage into gaining more customers in this world of unified communications, to include both fixed and wireless communications.
All right. Great stuff. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Remember, if you have any questions, send an email to webinar@talkaboutcable.com to get the automated reply with the information you're looking for. Until then, I'm Dean Waye. Have an amazing day.